Hello and welcome. You're watching Gravitas. I am Molly Gambhir. Let's get started. Is a recession on the horizon? If yes, when will it knock on our doors? How bad could things get? Some of these questions have been doing the rounds for a while now. There have been fears over a recession setting in, and over the last few days, these fears have only intensified. Here's what happened earlier today. The Indian rupee plunged to a record low, sliding past 81.5 against the US dollar. This is the lowest level in the history of India's currency. Just what is causing this? What is the global economic situation looking like? How valid are the fears over a looming recession? What are the predictions? And how should you prepare for that eventuality? That is our top focus in this edition of Gravitas. We were hoping for a positive start to the week. Unfortunately, that was not to be. The Indian markets opened on a downward spiral. The Nifty ended up losing 311 points. The Sensex, more than 950 points. A lot of eerie words are being thrown around, like Monday mayhem, bloodbath on the Lal Street. But what exactly led to this, and what does it mean for you? Let me explain. Put together, investors lost a lot of money today. Nearly 7 lakh crore rupees. That is $85 billion. And this did not start on Monday. The last working day, Friday, was equally bad. Investors lost nearly $49 billion. So that is 2 really bad days for the Indian markets. The question is, will things get worse? And to answer that, we must look at the factors driving this plunge. The first is the resurgent dollar. Earlier today, the Indian rupee plunged to a record low. It slid past 81.5 against the US dollar. This is the lowest level in the history of the Indian currency. What explains this slide? The economic uncertainty. During such times, investors prefer safety more than anything else. So they look at the dollar. It is considered to be safer than any currency in the world. When more people seek out the dollar, its value also increases. Simple logic. Higher the demand, higher the price. But for other currencies, this means depreciation. Take the British pound, for example. It has fallen to an all-time low against the dollar. The euro is at the lowest in 20 years. The Japanese yen is nearing its 24-year low. What does this mean for the markets? It means investors will not be interested anymore. They will take their money out of these markets and invest in safer avenues abroad. And it's already happening in India. On Friday, foreign institutional investors removed a chunk of their money from the Indian markets. How much money am I talking about? Nearly 2,900 crore rupees. Remember, that's in one day alone. All of these indicators point in one direction, a recession. Experts have already started sounding warnings. We earlier told you what Nouriel Roubini had said. He is a noted economist who had predicted the 2008 recession. He had another prophecy, and I'm afraid it's not good. Roubini says the world could face a long and ugly recession. Other agencies reflect this doomed forecast, like the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. They have a new report that's out. Let me tell you about the key takeaways. The global economy is expected to grow by 2.2% in 2023. Their first projection was 2.8%. So they have slashed it by 60 points. The Eurozone is expected to be the worst hit. Their GDP growth this year is projected at 3.1%. But next year, it could slow down to 0.3%. And if that happens, Europe could spend some part of 2023 in recession. Within Europe, Germany is the worst affected. Its GDP is expected to contract 0.7% next year. And there is a reason why Europe is expected to face the worst of it. In one word, energy. Their pivot from Russian gas is not going well. European countries have been forced to ration ahead of the winter. They are turning off air conditioners, regulating heaters, even switching off the street lights. Such rationing tactics inevitably slow the economy down. So at this rate, Europe could slip into a recession next year. What about the rest of the world? Well, a recession in Europe will likely be exported elsewhere. Take the US, for instance. Their GDP is expected to grow 1.5% in 2022. But next year, it is expected to slow to 0.5%. So maybe not a recession, but a lot of economic pain. And that pain will be felt all over the world, including in India. If the West slips into a recession, people in India will also feel the pinch. Fewer investments, fewer jobs, fewer exports. America is one of the biggest merchandise markets for India. Last year, their market share was 18.1%. If the US slips into a recession, that market will shrink. And experts say software could be the worst hit. So the bottom line is this. There will be a painful economic slowdown. The only concern is, will that snowball into a recession? A lot depends on what happens in the next few months. Will the US Federal Reserve announce more aggressive rate hikes? If yes, then a recession is more likely. Will the war in Ukraine drag on or intensify? If it does, supply chains will continue to suffer. Experts are continuously tracking indicators to predict a recession, and one of them being oil prices. If a recession is around the corner, oil prices usually fall. It's simple logic. During recession, economic activity falls, whether it's air travel, factory work, or industrial output, which means the demand for oil is low. So what are the oil prices looking like today? Again, not good news there. They plunged for a second straight day. Brent crude slipped 1.2%, and the West Texas Intermediate dropped 1.1%. Both of them are key global benchmarks of oil prices, and both of them are hinting at a recession. So how must you prepare for this? I know the economic jargon can sound scary, but recessions are part of any economic cycle. Planning and resilience will be key to overcoming them. So if you are worried about the looming crisis, keep these things in mind. First of all, prioritize safety nets like health and life insurance or education budgets for your children. They must be on the top of your to-do list. What about investments? If you are looking at equity, blue chip stocks are the way to go. Yes, they will also feel the pinch, but in the long run, they are safe bets. And experts also suggest investing in physical or alternate asset classes, for example, gold. And finally, your spending pattern. I'm afraid the era of cheap credit is coming to an end. Central banks are trying to curb spending with interest hikes. It's good to take a cue from them. Now may not be the time for splurging. So keep these tips in mind, and above all, stay on top of things. Make sure you are planning your finances more carefully this year. When times are tough, people turn towards the political leadership. Citizens want their leaders to show direction, offer clarity, and deal with the uncertainties. Citizens want their governments to cushion the blow. British citizens have the same expectations from their government. There is a new Prime Minister at the helm, and so far, it seems like she has failed to come through. Britain's economic pressures are mounting. We already told you how the pound is doing. A recession in the UK looks inevitable. The British economy has stagnated. The UK has now fallen behind India. Inflation has soared to around 10%, the highest level since the 1980s. There is an impending energy crisis. Basically, everything that can go wrong is going wrong. Liz Truss was supposed to save the day. Last week, her government finally revealed the long-awaited mini-budget. What is that? Basically, an emergency package of economic measures that should stabilize the economy. The UK's new Chancellor, Kwasi Kwarteng, called it the biggest package in generations, quote unquote. His main weapon to deal with the slowdown are tax cuts.
High tax rates damage Britain's competitiveness. They reduce the incentive to work, to invest, and to start a business. There are too many barriers for enterprise. We need a new approach to break them down, and that means reforming the supply side of our economy.
What barriers is he talking about? Let's tell you about the big moves, the takeaways from the mini-budget. The super rich tax has been completely abolished. Those earning above £150,000 will not have to pay an income tax of 45%. The basic rate of income tax is being cut by just 1%. From 20%, it will be reduced to 19% next year. The cap on bonuses for bankers has been lifted. Duties paid on houses have been slashed. There was a plan to increase taxes on businesses. That has also been scrapped. Energy prices have been capped for the next 6 months. No household will be paying more than £2,500 on energy bills for the next 1 year. That is around $2,800. How would you define this budget? I know what you're thinking. The tax cuts, the banker bonuses, the cuts on stamp duties. Will this not benefit the rich more than the poor? In times like these, when there is a cost of living crisis, shouldn't a government be more focused on relief measures? Well, Liz Truss has made her priorities clear. Her focus is on boosting government coffers. She wants Britons to swallow the bitter pill for now, even if her popularity takes a hit.
You're prepared to be unpopular, aren't you?
Yes, I am. What is important to me is that we grow the British economy, because that is what will ultimately deliver higher wages, more investment in towns and cities across the country. That is what will ultimately deliver more money into people's pockets.
Well, the backlash has begun. There is fierce criticism against the Truss government. Consider some of the headlines from today's newspapers in the UK. The Financial Times. Kwarteng pledges more tax cuts as Tory fears for sterling mount. The Metro went with a simple headline, tax wars. They are referring to the battle between the government and the opposition over the 45% tax rate for the super rich. The Guardian talked about this as well. They featured Keir Starmer's statement on the front page. The British leader of opposition has promised to bring back the 45% tax. The Daily Mirror. Tax cuts for the rich are immoral. And finally, the Times. Pay pain for workers as public sector squeezed. They are referring to the public backlash. Major protests could break out. Two out of three rail unions of the UK have made their plans public. They want to stage a walkout next week. It will happen just before a major Conservative Party conference. Thousands of workers are planning to leave their duties, and that could cause a shutdown of the UK's rail system. What are they complaining about? Poor wages. There is a fear that these protests could get bigger. British citizens are unhappy with the plans proposed by Liz Truss.
No way, nowhere near. They need to do a lot more, but who knows what they're going to do, to be honest, because the situation looks like it's just getting worse and worse and worse.
Awful, obviously. I mean, the people that are poor right now, that are on lower incomes, they're struggling with their heating and all their bills. Everything's gone up. Why on earth would they be cutting it for the people in a higher income bracket? It's ridiculous. London's getting worse. England's getting worse, to be honest. So, yeah, it's a stupid move, a dumb move, obviously.
Investors are also not confident about the British government's plans. The pound has collapsed to its lowest level since 1971, a 51-year low against the US dollar. There is a mass sell-off of British government bonds. Experts say the British government would need to borrow more. The package of tax cuts is worth $48 billion. That is the money that the British government will lose from its revenue. So to fill the gap, London may need to borrow some cash. The new British Chancellor is now under scrutiny, and today he faced some tough questions from a journalist. Here is how he chose to respond.
Chancellor, what are you going to do about the turmoil on the markets this morning, sir?
I'm not going to make any comment now. Thank you.
Well, what about the city? What conversation are you having with the Bank of England, sir? Do you have anything to say about what's going on, sir? Are you planning to reverse the announcement you made last Friday, sir? What do you have to say about everything that's been going on, sir?
Just going to my office now. Thanks.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
So the intent is to brazen it out. Liz Truss is adamant to remain on this path. Her resolve will certainly be tested in the coming days. Our next story comes from Japan. In the next 24 hours, it plans to hold a national ceremony, a grand state funeral for Shinzo Abe, the former Prime Minister of Japan. On the 8th of July this year, he was assassinated in Nara during a campaign speech. 4 days later, he was buried in Tokyo at a Buddhist temple. There were only family and friends in attendance. And almost 3 months later, he is being honored with a state funeral, an official ceremony by the government of Japan. On your screen are visuals from the funeral venue, the Nippon Budokan Arena in central Tokyo. On Tuesday, hundreds of Japanese leaders and tens of foreign dignitaries will assemble here to pay their last respects to Shinzo Abe. But before that, they will have to face the ire of these people, these protesters who are rallying in Tokyo to make the authorities call off that ceremony. But why? Because it's too expensive. According to reports, the estimated cost of this funeral is 1.65 billion yen. That's $11.4 million, 10.1 million euros. That's a huge amount. And it doesn't take the hidden costs into account. Reports say that by all means, millions more will be incurred. Now, for the sake of perspective, let's tell you that at a humongous $11 million, this funeral will be even costlier than that of the Queen's, which reportedly cost the crown 8 million euros. This news has upset the people of Japan, the taxpayers who will be paying for the funeral. They don't want the government to spend so much, especially given the economic condition of Japan. It is still recovering from a pandemic-induced slowdown. So thousands of people have hit the streets. They are demonstrating against this ceremony and slamming their government for splurging money. Some want the money to be spent elsewhere. Others are slamming the government for acting at whim. Listen to this.
When many people are still financially struggling due to the pandemic, it is outrageous to use tax money, as much as 1.6 billion yen, to hold a state funeral. I don't think it should be accepted. We must not stay quiet. This is why I am here.
Prime Minister Kishida made the decision to hold the state funeral without national deliberation. He decided only in his cabinet. The parliamentary system is not working anymore. The ruling parties are doing whatever they want just because they hold the majority in parliament.
These protests are no small affair. Reports say more than 10,000 people are marching on the streets of Tokyo to get this funeral cancelled. They are upset. They are angry. Some are so frustrated that they are self-immolating. Look at this headline. Last Wednesday, a man set himself on fire outside the Japanese Prime Minister's office. Reports say he was in his 70s and sustained large burns on his body. His decision to self-immolate was not just over the expenditure, but also due to Shinzo Abe's tainted legacy. Some uncomfortable revelations that were made immediately after his death. You see, the gunman who killed Shinzo Abe had cited Abe's beliefs as the reason behind his decision. What kind of beliefs? Abe's ties with the Unification Church. What is that? A South Korea-based religious body which is often called a dangerous cult. Its teachings differ from Orthodox Christian values, and its members are deeply involved in Japanese politics. In fact, Japan's ruling party has confessed that almost 179 of its 379 lawmakers had direct or indirect links with this body, and Shinzo Abe was one of them. These revelations have ignited a political storm. The church is notorious for its secret activities. A string of lawsuits further dented its popularity. The people of Japan are citing Abe's links to this body as another reason for that ceremony to be called off. The third reason is that Abe was no royal. In Japan, state funerals are usually held for royals, members of the imperial family of Japan. Politicians rarely get this honor. Only once since the Second World War has a politician been accorded a state funeral, and this explains why Abe's funeral is controversial. But for the government of Japan, it has become a matter of pride, mostly because of the guest list. Over 6,000 people are going to attend this funeral. Among them will be 50 past and present leaders from around the world. This includes Singapore's Prime Minister, the Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and the US Vice President Kamala Harris. In fact, Harris is already in Japan. As part of a 3-day tour, she is holding meetings with Japanese leaders and will attend the funeral on Tuesday. These developments have put Japan in a tough spot. On one hand, it has world leaders flying down to Tokyo. On the other, it has its own people protesting on the streets. This story is still developing, and we will be tracking all those updates. Our next story is from Italy. On the 25th of September, the country went to the polls to elect a new government. The preliminary results are out, and they put the Brothers of Italy in lead, a quote-unquote far-right party with links to Benito Mussolini. Its leader is expected to be the next Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, a development that has unnerved many leaders in Europe. Our next report telling you why.
This is Giorgia Meloni, the would-be Prime Minister of Italy, the first woman ever to take the post. On Sunday, her far-right alliance of 3 parties claimed about 43% of the total vote. They're now expected to secure at least 114 seats in the Senate. This has put Giorgia Meloni on track to be the Prime Minister, an opportunity she's calling a starting point.
Però quando stanotte sarà passata, quando questa notte sarà passata.
When this night is over, we have to remember, and we must remember, that we are not at the end point. We are at the starting point. It's from tomorrow that we must prove our worth.
But not everyone is excited about her victory, mostly because of her political credentials. You see, Giorgia Meloni is what they call a far-right leader. She heads the Brothers of Italy, a party known for its conservative views. It opposes abortion, immigration, euthanasia, and same-sex marriages, among other controversial policies. The party is also filled with Mussolini nostalgists, lawmakers who believe in the ideology of Benito Mussolini, the Italian dictator who is credited for giving birth to fascism. In fact, his granddaughter is also a part of Brothers of Italy. Her name is Rachel Mussolini, a lawmaker who sits on Rome's municipal council. So many see this party's victory as the return of fascism in Italy. Italian lawmakers are describing their victory as a sad day for not just Italy, but all of Europe.
Today is a sad day for Italy, for Europe. Tough days lie ahead. We fought as much as we could to avoid this outcome. We fought for our values and with the aim to take Italy into the future.
The chief of the European Commission has also issued a veiled warning. She has warned Italy of consequences should it veer away from democratic principles, which brings us to a question. How exactly does this victory impact Europe? Meloni's Eurosceptic policies give you an idea. In the past, she has supported leaving the Eurozone in order to help Italy assert its interests better, a position she abandoned right before the polls. But there's no saying if it will make a comeback. Secondly, it could realign Italy's position on the war in Ukraine. Meloni has often claimed that she wants to put Italy first. This has led to fears of vetoes during crucial votes on Ukraine. Third, analysts expect a rehaul of Italy's list of friends. From left-wing liberal democratic states, it may pivot to more conservative states, like Poland and Hungary. So, to put it simply, Italy, which is Europe's third largest economy and a founding member of the European Union, may witness a radical shift in its approach if Giorgia Meloni assumes power. This shift may have unnerved many. But it's a shift the people of Italy have overwhelmingly voted for. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
There is an election in China too. Well, to be honest, it is not really an election. It is more like a coronation. Xi Jinping is set to become China's president for a record third term. It will happen next month when the Communist Party will be meeting for its 20th Congress. And there are a lot of updates. There is a lot of noise as well. Tonight, we bring you the facts. Preparations are underway in Beijing. The Communist Party has drawn up the guest list. I'm talking about the list of delegates. Who are these delegates? They are basically members of the Communist Party. Think of them as officials who represent each and every corner of China and all the wings of the Communist Party and the Chinese government. How many of them are there? A total of 2,296 delegates. In a democracy, you would call these delegates parliamentarians. They will go to the parliament to represent their constituencies. They will vote when important bills are tabled and perhaps debate on issues of public interest. But this is China we are talking about. These delegates are not parliamentarians. They are the men and women who will rubber stamp Xi Jinping's decisions. This is a press release announcing the election, quote-unquote, of the party delegates, but they are hardly the focus of the story here. This press release is about Xi Jinping and how he is still at the center of everything in China. Let's zoom into this statement. Look at the second paragraph. It declares how Xi Jinping influences even the selection of the delegates. Let me quote. Under the guidance of Xi Jinping thought, the delegates were elected in accordance with the party constitution, the CPC Central Committee's requirements, adopting methods required by the CPC Central Committee. That statement speaks for itself. China's state-owned mouthpieces have gone into an overdrive. They are burnishing Xi Jinping's credentials before that big day. Look at the China Daily. It featured a quote from Xi Jinping. A warlike state, however big it may be, will eventually perish. This seems like a thinly veiled attack on the United States. The mouthpieces are also showing the softer side of the Chinese president. Here is Xi Jinping, the soccer fan. Beijing is also sending messages to the Communist Party delegates. The People's Daily is the official newspaper of the Communist Party. It has published an editorial. Here's what it has to say about the 20th Party Congress. Under the strong leadership of the Central Committee, with Comrade Xi Jinping at its core, the 20th Congress will be a Congress of unity, victory, and endeavor. So the Communist Party is rallying behind Xi Jinping. The party is also undertaking a cleanup before the big event. Officials are being purged. Several former senior law enforcement officials have been sent to prison. We have a list. A former Vice Minister for Public Security, a former Justice Minister, an old provincial security czar, and 3 former regional police chiefs. They all were pronounced guilty last week in quick succession. The punishment? It ranges from a 14-year jail term to suspended death sentences. That usually means life imprisonment in China. The list of convicts includes a high-profile name, Sun Lijun. He was the Vice Minister for Public Security. He has been found guilty of, quote-unquote, leading a political clique and for being disloyal to Xi Jinping. What's the punishment? Life imprisonment. The purge and the declarations of loyalty by the state mouthpieces showing how Xi Jinping still remains firmly in control of the Chinese state. The party congress next month will show the world the depth of his power again. Can our planet be protected from a deadly asteroid? In movies, yes. But in reality, no one knows. NASA plans to have an answer later today. It is deploying a spacecraft to crash into a football-sized asteroid. The idea is to veer the asteroid off its path and test the space agency's ability to protect our planet from deadly asteroids. Here's a report.
What if a huge asteroid hits the Earth and we all die? Are we capable of protecting ourselves against such an eventuality? Can we stop an asteroid from hitting our planet? So far, things like these have only happened in the movies. What's happening in real life? Enter NASA. It is crashing a spacecraft on an asteroid to veer it off its course. It will be a clash that the whole world will be tracking closely. Meet DART, also known as the Double Asteroid Redirection Test. This NASA spacecraft has been tasked with saving our planet. DART blasted off from the Earth last November. Soon, it will be taking a giant asteroid head-on. This is Dimorphos. It is an asteroid as big as a football field. DART will strike Dimorphos, and this will be at a speed of 20,000 kilometers per hour. The impact will happen at 11:14 p.m. GMT on the 26th of September, which in Indian Standard Time is 4:44 a.m. on 27th of September. Dimorphos, like we mentioned, is the size of a football field, some 163 meters wide. That is just 16 meters wide in comparison. But NASA hopes that the clash between the two will change the asteroid's velocity, as a result of which the rock's path will change too. Now, you must note that Dimorphos is not a killer asteroid, as in it is not a threat to Earth. It is neither heading towards our planet, nor is it expected to do that anytime in the future. What NASA will be conducting is a test in planetary defense. You could say it is NASA's way of trying to show the world that it is capable of defending the Earth, so that tomorrow, if a Dimorphos-sized asteroid heads towards Earth, then NASA can strike it.
Planetary defense is like earth science and space weather. It's one of those domains of science that really can have societal impact. And if you looked at the threats we have each and every day on a daily, per day basis, right now, what happens with our Earth, obviously it's a bigger threat to your and my life.
But striking Dimorphos will not be an easy job. There's a villain in the story. And no, it is not Dimorphos. Meet Didymos. It is a 780-meter wide asteroid. Dimorphos and Didymos make a binary asteroid system. Dimorphos is a smaller asteroid. Didymos, the larger one. Dimorphos is the moonlet, as in it orbits Didymos. The asteroid takes around 11 hours and 55 minutes to complete a circle. Now the problem is that we'll be able to distinguish Dimorphos from Didymos only 50 minutes before the clash. When the impact happens, Dimorphos' speed will be slowed down by a fraction of a percent. While that might not seem like much, it will be a huge moment in the history of planetary defense. This moment will be caught by telescopes. All of this will be happening 11 million kilometers from Earth, and space enthusiasts will be looking up at the sky in wonder.
Let's now talk about fitness. Very often we are told that the mantra to staying fit is 10,000 steps a day. No matter how busy you are, if you manage to walk 10,000 steps a day, you should be fine. That's as long as you walk 10,000 steps a day. As long as you do that, you need not worry about heart diseases, weight-related problems, dementia, or premature deaths. Such is the obsession with 10K steps that many people frantically walk up and down corridors or meaninglessly take rounds of their workplace just so that they can check off that target before they go to bed. But what if it's all for nothing? What if there is no solid logic to this 10,000 step theory? Have a look at this study. It clearly says that people who walked even 3,800 steps had lower risk of dementia. In fact, it goes on to say, when it comes to the association between walking and decline in dementia, it is only valid for up to 9,800 steps per day. And beyond this, the benefits upturn. Here's another study. This one talks about the association between walking and lower risk of cancer. It says that while walking up to 10,000 steps may be associated with lower risk of cancer, what provides additional benefits is how intensely you take those steps. There's one thing that both these studies point towards, and that is the pace of your walking. Not how many steps you take, but how fast you take them. The findings of the first study, for example, saying steps with higher intensity are associated with lower risk of dementia. So this brings us back to that question, does 10K steps a day really matter? If these studies hold any truth, then the answer would be not really. It does not matter whether or not you walk 10,000 steps a day. What matters is how fast you walk. Researchers compared the most intense minutes of activity of the participants. They found that those whose peak speeds were brisk had lower health risks. Now, what qualifies as brisk walking? 90 steps a minute. Researchers found that those who walked fast had 30% lower risk of developing dementia, also 25% lower risk of developing cancer and heart disease, and a 35% lower risk of premature death. In other words, the pace of your walking may matter more than the distance. In short, it is speed over steps. At least that's what these studies claim. The question is, where does this leave that 10K steps logic? Also, how did we come up with that number? Is it an arbitrary figure or a well-calculated one? Actually, neither. The 10,000 steps goal is a result of brilliant marketing. Let me tell you a little story here. It goes back to the year 1964. That year, Tokyo was hosting the Olympics. And thanks to the games, there was a sudden interest in fitness among the locals there. A Japanese company called Yamasa Clock saw this as an opportunity to do something big. It capitalized on that interest in fitness and mass-produced pedometers. Some of you might be wondering, what is a pedometer? It's a device that counts your steps. So Yamasa Clock mass-produced this device. Its pedometer was named Manpo-K. It's Japanese for 10,000 steps meter. So that's one story that explains that 10K logic. Over the years, this number has been challenged multiple times. This one time, the University of Texas conducted a study. It found that 8,500 steps should be enough if a person is aiming to increase their metabolism. Another study found that 7,500 steps should be enough for a lower mortality rate. The study especially points out that post 7,500 steps, the association between lower mortality rate and the steps levels up, meaning does not matter if you complete your 10K steps or not, the result will be the same as clocking in 7,500 steps. So what should you do? Stop at 7,500 steps? It's actually up to you, and your doctor will be able to tell you best. You see, there is no harm in walking that extra mile. It's hard to overlook the benefits of walking. Walking increases cardiovascular fitness. It reduces the risk of heart disease and stroke. It helps reduce joint pains, also reduces muscle stiffness. Walking is good for those suffering from diabetes. It also reduces body fat. So definitely continue walking. But do try picking up your pace. You need not walk fast all throughout the day, but keep those little bursts of brisk walking. It will only help you reap the benefits of both brisk walking and walking in general. Getting 10,000 steps in may be good for your health, but sometimes even one extra step can be controversial. It all depends on the context of that step. Are you confused? Let me tell you the backstory. This Saturday, the Indian women's cricket team was playing England. It was the third match of their one-day series. India had already taken an unassailable 2-0 lead. But on Saturday, they were looking for a whitewash, a comprehensive 3-0 sweep. But England had other plans. They were chasing 170 runs for victory. They lost a lot of quick wickets, but the last one was proving tricky to take. Charlie Dean and Freya Davis put on a great partnership. By the 44th over, they needed just 18 runs to win. Have a look at what happened next.
In sweep.
No. I'm not so sure. I know it's in the laws, well within her rights to do that.
The bowler was Deepti Sharma. She ran out the non-striker Charlie Dean in her run-up, what many uncharitably call mankading. Dean was getting a head start even before the ball was delivered. According to the laws of cricket, this is illegal. The non-striker is supposed to stay inside the crease until the ball is released. Only then can they leave. So the law is pretty clear about this situation. If the non-striker is outside the crease, the bowler can run them out. No warnings, no discussions with the umpire. It is a legitimate way of taking a wicket. But try telling that to British fans and tabloids. They are still salty about the incident. Why is that? Because according to them, it is against the spirit of the game. At least 3 English cricketers have criticised Deepti Sharma. James Anderson, Stuart Broad and Sam Billings. All 3 of them had the same argument that it was against the spirit of cricket. Charlie Dean herself feels she was wronged. She was playing a domestic cricket match on Sunday. She found herself in the same position as Deepti Sharma. As she was winding up to bowl, the non-striker began leaving the crease. Dean opted against running her out. Now, this debate is not exactly new. Mankading is probably one of the most controversial things in cricket. It is named after legendary Indian player Vinod Mankad. He is believed to be the first person to effect this dismissal. Today, its most forceful supporter is Indian off-spinner Ravi Ashwin. Look at how he responded to that criticism from the England players. He said bowlers should get a bravery award for running out non-strikers. Why is that? Because they know the social stigma that follows it. Frankly, it's hard to argue with that. The laws of cricket are very clear about this form of dismissal. In fact, the Marylebone Cricket Club has clarified the laws again. MCC's message to non-strikers continues to be to remain in their ground until they have seen the ball leave the bowler's hand. And on Saturday, Charlie Dean did not do that. And for the record, she was consistently doing this. Some fans have actually poured through the replays to find evidence of it. Take a look at these pictures. Dean was consistently leaving the crease before the ball was delivered. She was getting a head start. So Deepti Sharma did what the laws permit her to do. She ran her out. Now, some bowlers often warn the batter against doing that, maybe 1 or 2 warnings. But if they continue to do this, they run them out. England say there were no such warnings. The Indian players say Charlie Dean was repeatedly warned.
कुछ नहीं, वो प्लान था हम लोगों का, क्योंकि वो बार-बार हम वार्न भी कर चुके थे उसको. तो जो रूल्स में जो गाइडलाइंस है उसके अकॉर्डिंग ही हमने किया.
The fact is, it does not matter if there was a warning or not. The laws do not require the bowler to warn the non-striker. They can run them out in the first instance. To avoid such debates in the future, the International Cricket Council has updated their rules. The new laws will come into effect on the 1st of October. Let me tell you the big changes. Until now, mankading was listed under unfair play. Legal but unfair. But the new laws have changed that. Mankading will now be listed under runouts. Also, the nomenclature will be changing. You are not supposed to call it mankading anymore. It's just another runout. So we will be sticking to that as well. The question is, how can the laws of the game violate its spirit? The answer is they cannot. Maybe some players do not like running out the non-striker. Well, good for them. But you cannot criticize players who do. They are only following the laws of the game. In fact, you could say the non-strikers are violating the game spirit. Nowadays, most players are excellent fielders, so runouts are always around the corner. Even the slightest head start could be the difference between a run and a run out. In that context, should batters be allowed to leave the crease early? Is that not violating the game spirit? I would say yes. So focusing on that run out is a disservice to the game we had on Saturday. It was fiercely competitive. It was fun to watch. But in the end, one team was more aware of the laws and the circumstances. Let's not criticize them for that. Instead, let's ask our batters to follow the laws of the game. Let's now tell you what else made news. Time for Gravitas Global Headlines.
At least 15 people killed and 20 injured in a school in Russia's Izhevsk. after a gunman opened fire and later shot himself. UN atomic watchdog chief Rafael Grossi says he is ready to hold talks in Ukraine and Russia this week on setting up a protection zone at the Russian-held Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant in Ukraine. Germany says it has summoned the Iranian ambassador over the Islamic Republic's crackdown on protests driven by the death of a young woman after her arrest by the morality police. US and Britain call for a debate at the UN Human Rights Council to discuss China's treatment of Uyghurs following a report warning of possible crimes against humanity. Apple announces it will manufacture the iPhone 14 in India as the tech giant moves part of its production away from China. Protesters took to the streets of Mexico City against the government's decision to give the army control over the civilian-led National Guard and keep it deployed on the country's streets until 2028. Filipino authorities rushed to distribute aid to evacuees after Typhoon Noru made landfall in the capital and northern provinces, leaving at least 5 dead and many areas flooded. At least 2 people are missing and 3 others were injured in Guatemala after 2 giant sinkholes opened up in a street near the country's capital. The 3 injured people fell into a sinkhole of about 15 meters. Netherlands have booked their place in the finals of the UEFA Nations League with a 1-0 victory over Belgium. Captain Virgil van Dijk scored the only goal of the game in Amsterdam. Croatia joined the Dutch after a 3-1 victory over Austria in Vienna. The United States team have won a 9th straight President's Cup title after a 17.5 to 12.5 win over the international team. The Americans survived a spirited comeback from the less fancied international team to win in Charlotte, North Carolina.
And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of Gravitas, leaving you with Gravitas images. Thanks very much for watching.
2, 1, 0 gravity.
C'est ça. C'est bon.